Meet Sarah, a devoted wife and mother of two who thought she had the perfect life. But beneath the surface, her husband was hiding secrets that would shatter everything she believed in. A shocking discovery would soon expose the truth about his double life. At first glance, Sarah's marriage to Tom seemed perfect. They had been together since college, built a beautiful home in the suburbs, and were raising two adorable kids. Their friends would often comment on how lucky they were to have found their soulmate so young. But beneath the surface, I've learned that things weren't as rosy as they appeared. Sarah would often complain about Tom's long working hours, but when she'd try to discuss it with him, he'd just brush it off and tell her everything was fine. She started feeling like she was walking on eggshells around him, never knowing what would set him off. And then there were the increasingly rare date nights. They'd plan these romantic evenings out, only for Tom to cancel at the last minute with some excuse or another. Sarah tried to brush it off as stress from work, but deep down she knew something was off. The way he'd quickly change the subject when she brought up his family. The fact that he never introduced her to his coworkers, even though they had a big company picnic every year. These tiny cracks in their relationship were like a slow-moving storm cloud, gathering on the horizon. It's been 3 years since Sarah and Mike got married, but lately, she can't shake off this feeling of disconnection. They're like two strangers living in the same house, with their own separate lives. Sarah remembers the way they used to laugh together, the way Mike would surprise her with her favorite coffee in bed. But now, it's all just a faint memory. She feels like she's walking on eggshells around him, never knowing what will trigger an argument or a cold shoulder. It all started with little things, almost imperceptible at first. Like the way John would suddenly stop mid-sentence, or become overly defensive when Sarah asked about his day. He'd claim he was just stressed, or that she was overreacting. But deep down, Sarah knew something wasn't quite right. There were nights when she'd call him from work and he wouldn't answer, only to receive a delayed response hours later. One particular evening stands out in her mind. John had promised to pick up their daughter from soccer practice, but when Sarah arrived at the field, he was nowhere to be found. He texted her an apologetic message, explaining that traffic got bad and he'd be home soon. But what really caught her attention was the way he kept glancing over his shoulder, as if he was checking to see if anyone was watching him. Sarah brushed it off as paranoia or insecurity on her part. After all, John had never given her any reason to doubt his honesty before, or so she thought. Looking back now, those fleeting moments of unease should have been the first warning signs that something was terribly wrong. As Sarah confronted her husband about the inconsistencies in his story, he became defensive, dismissive even. At first, he denied any wrongdoing, telling her that she was just being paranoid and reading too much into things. But as the conversation continued, he began to shift the blame onto her, making it sound like she was somehow responsible for his actions. He'd say things like, "You're always so jealous when I talk to other women," or "You've been stressed out lately, that's why you're being so sensitive." He even went so far as to suggest that Sarah's own family dynamics were the root of all their problems. It was a classic case of blame shifting, and it left her feeling confused, guilty, and unsure of what was real. In one particularly disturbing conversation, he even accused her of being obsessive or wanting to know more about his whereabouts on specific days. This is when the gaslighting began, making Sarah question her own perceptions, her sanity even. It's a tactic that would become all too familiar as their relationship continued to unravel. As Sarah confronted her husband about the inconsistencies in his story, she began to realize that he was a master manipulator. He would become enraged, denying any wrongdoing, and then suddenly calm down, as if nothing had happened. He would say things like, "You're just being paranoid again," or "You're reading too much into this." Sarah felt like she was losing her grip on reality, questioning her own perceptions of the truth. During one heated argument, he even went so far as to say that she was the one who had been unfaithful. The gaslighting was relentless, making Sarah feel like she was walking on eggshells around him, never knowing what would trigger another explosion. Sarah felt trapped in a never-ending cycle of guilt and self-doubt. She began to wonder if she was truly imagining things, or if her husband was indeed living a double life. The more she pushed for answers, the more he would push back, making it seem like she was the one who was crazy. As Sarah continued to dig deeper, she began to unravel the threads of her husband's secret life. She discovered that he had been leading a double life for over 5 years, hiding in plain sight from their friends and family. His mistress was a woman named Emily, who worked with him at the office. They would often sneak away together during work hours, taking long lunches and extended breaks to meet up at his favorite coffee shop. Sarah found receipts and emails on his phone, detailing their secret trysts. She also discovered that he had been using their vacation home as a hideout for Emily and her young daughter, who was the same age as their own child. He would take them on lavish trips, buying gifts and paying for expensive activities without ever telling Sarah about it. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how far his lies went. She felt like she was living in a nightmare, questioning everything she thought they had built together. As Sarah dug deeper into her husband's lies, she began to uncover a web of deceit that went far beyond his own actions. She discovered that his closest friends were also involved in covering up his secret life. They would often host them at their homes, laughing and joking together as if nothing was amiss. But what Sarah realized now was that these men had been complicit in her husband's deception from the start. It wasn't until Sarah stumbled upon a cryptic text message on her husband's phone that the full extent of his deception began to unravel. At first, she thought nothing of it, just a careless mistake from someone he had worked with. But as she dug deeper, she discovered a second family he had been secretly living with for years. The children, 2 girls and a boy, all around school age, were the product of this other relationship. Sarah's mind reeled as she scrolled through photos on her husband's phone. Birthday parties, vacations, everyday moments shared between them. He was their father in every sense of the word, yet he had never mentioned them to her. As she pored over his phone records and social media profiles, Sarah realized that her husband had been leading a double life for years. He had 2 homes, 2 families, and 2 separate lives. The realization left her feeling like she was living in a dream or a nightmare. Everything she thought she knew about their marriage, about him, was a lie. I remember the day everything changed for Sarah. It wasn't just one moment, but a series of small revelations that finally added up to the truth. She was driving home from work, stuck in traffic, when she saw the email on her husband's phone. The one he'd always said was from his brother or his business partner. But this time, it was different. This time, there were photos. Photos of a woman holding a baby with a caption that read, "Meet my family." Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the gut. She pulled over to the side of the road and just sat there, trying to process what she was seeing. The memory of all those late nights, early mornings, and excuses started flooding back. The times he said he had work meetings but really was at a movie premiere with his secret family. The way he'd always been distant, preoccupied, and now it made perfect sense. Sarah's mind was racing, her heart pounding. She knew in that moment she couldn't stay married to this man anymore. As the dust settled, Sarah was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. The divorce was a long and grueling process, with custody battles that seemed to drag on forever. She had never felt so lost and alone. Her children, who had once been the center of their happy family unit, were now caught in the crossfire of their parents' toxic relationship. They struggled to adjust to the new dynamics, missing the comfort and security of a traditional home life. Sarah's world was turned upside down as she juggled her own grief, the stress of court battles, and the pressure to provide for her children. She had to find a way to support herself financially, all while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in their lives. Sleepless nights were the norm as Sarah worried about what the future held. Would they ever be able to rebuild? Could she trust anyone again? The aftermath of discovery was a cruel awakening for Sarah. She had thought she knew her husband, but it turned out he was living a secret life, one that would leave her forever changed. As I look back on everything that happened, there's one thing that still keeps me up at night. The thought of what could have been if only I'd known then what I know now. I wish someone had sat down with me and said, "Sarah, be careful. Don't let your guard down." But life doesn't work like that, does it? We're all just trying to figure things out as we go. I think about the times he would get these sudden phone calls or disappear for hours without warning. I brushed them off as work-related stress, but now I realize they were red flags waving in my face. I wish I'd listened to that nagging feeling in my gut when it told me something wasn't right. But we all know hindsight is 20/20. What would I do differently? I'd be more open and honest with myself about what I saw, rather than justifying or making excuses for his behavior. I'd trust my instincts more and not be so quick to give people the benefit of the doubt. It's hard to learn these lessons, but if I can pass them on to you, maybe you won't have to go through what I did. As I reflect on my own experience, I realized there were so many warning signs that I ignored at first. Signs like when your partner becomes overly defensive or dismissive of your concerns. They might say things like, "You're being too sensitive," or "You're just imagining it." That's gaslighting, folks. It's a way to manipulate and control you into doubting yourself. When someone is living a secret life, they often become masters at hiding the truth. They'll make excuses for their absence or lack of communication. Maybe they'll say they were working late or had an emergency. Or maybe they'll just disappear altogether. I remember one instance when my partner would frequently cancel plans at the last minute. I'd ask them why, and they'd brush it off with a vague excuse. But I knew something was off. My intuition was screaming at me to pay attention. Don't make the same mistake I did. If your partner is consistently inconsistent or evasive, trust your instincts. Don't let them talk you down or convince you that you're overreacting. You have every right to be concerned and investigate further. You see, on the surface, Sarah thought she was a victim of her husband's deceit. But as we dug deeper, I realized that she had been tolerating his toxic behavior for far too long. Why? Because she feared being alone again. The thought of going back to living in a small apartment with no stability, no security, and no one to rely on. It paralyzed her. She stayed because of the societal expectations placed upon her. Her friends, family, and even colleagues would say things like, "You're so strong for putting up with this," or, "At least he's providing for you." But what they didn't understand was that she wasn't just tolerating his infidelity. She was sacrificing her own happiness. I saw it time and time again. Women staying in relationships because of fear or societal pressure. They're not weak. They're just human beings trying to survive. And as I looked at Sarah's situation, I couldn't help but wonder, had she been living a lie? Was this just a part of her life that she wanted to keep hidden from the world? As we continue down this dark path, I want to explore the devastating impact of betrayal on trust in a relationship. For Sarah, the moment she discovered her husband's secret life was like a punch to the gut. Everything she thought she knew about their marriage, their family, and even herself came crashing down. She couldn't eat, sleep, or focus. The anxiety was suffocating. The questions swirled in her mind. How could he do this? How long had it been going on? But more than anything, Sarah felt a deep-seated sense of shame and embarrassment. Why didn't she see the signs? Why did she ignore the red flags? As days turned into weeks, the wounds only deepened. The relationship was never the same again. They both struggled to trust each other, but more importantly, they struggled to trust themselves. Sarah's friends and family tried to be supportive, but even their words of encouragement felt hollow. The pain of betrayal is a heavy burden to carry, and it can leave emotional scars that take years to heal. In the next section, we'll examine how enablers often play a crucial role in enabling cheaters, making them complicit in the deception. As I reflect on my ex-husband's secret life, I'm reminded that his betrayal wasn't just about him. It was also about the people who enabled him along the way. His best friend, in particular, would often cover for him when he'd call in sick from work or cancel plans at the last minute, without ever questioning why. He'd even help him move furniture to our new home, completely oblivious to the fact that my ex was still living with his mistress. But it wasn't just his friends who were enablers. Our own family members played a role too. My mother-in-law would often ask me about our extended family trips, completely unaware of the truth. And when I'd mention my husband's late nights at work, she'd nod in understanding, never once wondering why he was always so exhausted. It's chilling to think that these innocent-seeming actions were actually contributing to my ex's ability to live a double life, one that was built on lies and deceit. As I reflect on my journey, I realize that healing wasn't just about confronting the pain, but also about embracing a new chapter. For me, it started with small steps towards self-care. I began by reconnecting with old friends who never judged me, and slowly rebuilding my social network. I also discovered yoga, which became an essential part of my daily routine. It helped calm my mind and soothe my soul. I started taking long walks in nature, watching the sunset over the ocean, and feeling the sand between my toes. It was a simple, yet powerful reminder that life is beautiful and full of possibilities. I rekindled my passion for painting, which had been dormant for years, and found solace in creating art that reflected my emotions. I learned to forgive myself and others, not for their sake, but for mine. Forgiveness wasn't about letting go of the pain, but about releasing the weight that was holding me back. It's a process I still work on today, but it's one that has given me the freedom to move forward with purpose and intention. As I look back on that dark time in my life, I realize that the pain was a catalyst for growth. It forced me to dig deep within myself and discover new strengths I never knew I had. I started taking art classes, something I'd always been interested in but never made time for. It became an escape from reality, a way to express emotions that were too raw to put into words. I remember the first time I picked up a paintbrush, feeling it glide effortlessly across the canvas. The sense of calm that washed over me was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It wasn't just about finding new hobbies. I was also discovering my passions and values. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, which not only gave me a sense of purpose, but also connected me with like-minded individuals who understood what I was going through. Through this journey, I gained a newfound sense of self-worth, one that wasn't tied to anyone else's approval or validation. It was mine alone. As I stood on that stage, feeling the weight of my newfound independence, I realized something profound. Having a strong support system had been instrumental in my healing process. It wasn't just about having friends or family to turn to. It was about surrounding myself with people who understood what I was going through. I joined a therapy group specifically designed for women who'd experienced infidelity. There were tears, screams of anger, and moments of raw vulnerability, but also there was hope. We shared our stories, validated each other's emotions, and collectively worked towards rebuilding our shattered sense of self-worth. One woman, Rachel, had been married to a pastor when she discovered his secret family. Another, Sarah, had spent 10 years in an abusive relationship before finally escaping. As we connected, sharing our experiences and strategies for recovery, I felt seen, heard, and understood. For the first time, I realized that I wasn't alone. Our collective support system helped me see that healing was possible, and that it didn't have to be a solo journey. As I reflect on my experience, I realize that there were red flags scattered throughout our relationship. Red flags that I ignored, or convinced myself, didn't mean anything. But if I'm being honest with myself, they should have been warning signs. So, what are these red flags? Let's break them down. Changes in behavior. Did your partner suddenly become distant, withdrawn, or secretive? Did you notice a change in their daily habits, like working late every night, or spending hours on the phone? Communication changes. Were conversations becoming one-sided, with your partner dominating the conversation and interrupting you? Or maybe they became dismissive of your feelings and concerns. Inconsistencies in stories. Did your partner's alibis start to unravel, or did they become evasive when questioned about their whereabouts? Financial discrepancies. Did you notice unexplained expenses on credit card statements or mysterious bank transactions? These red flags may seem minor at first, but trust me, they can be a sign of something much bigger. If you're seeing any of these patterns in your relationship, it's time to take a step back and reassess. For me, it was the combination of all these factors that ultimately led me to uncover the truth about my partner's secret life. As I look back on those painful days, I realized that the most devastating part wasn't just the discovery itself, but the impact it had on our children. They were young when their father's infidelity began, and as he continued to lead a double life, they picked up on his guilt-ridden behavior. The late nights spent working, the sudden mood swings, and the whispered phone calls. My daughter would often ask me if Daddy was okay, sensing that something was terribly wrong, and my son would become withdrawn, struggling to make sense of why his father couldn't be honest with him. They felt guilty for not being able to protect us from their father's deceit. I remember the countless nights I had to explain to them what cheating meant, while trying to shield them from the harsh reality. It was as if they were living in a perpetual state of uncertainty, never knowing what truth to believe. Those years were like an emotional earthquake for our family, leaving scars that still linger today. Rebuilding trust after the truth comes out is like trying to put a puzzle back together, but with missing pieces that can never be replaced. It's a daunting task, one that requires effort from both parties, but most importantly, it demands honesty and vulnerability. Sarah had to confront the harsh reality that her husband, John, had been living a double life for years, hiding his secret family behind a facade of lies and deceit. She recalls the countless nights spent researching online, searching for any shred of evidence that would confirm her worst fears. The late-night conversations with friends, who listened with sympathetic ears but offered no solace. And then there were the moments when John would try to justify his actions, making excuses that only fueled Sarah's anger and hurt. As they sat in therapy sessions, struggling to navigate this new reality, Sarah would often feel like she was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. She couldn't help but wonder if their marriage was even worth saving. The cracks had been exposed, and it seemed like the foundation was crumbling beneath them. As I stood there, watching my world crumble around me, I couldn't help but wonder how this had all been hidden for so long. The lies, the secrets, the carefully crafted facades. It was a fragile web that had been holding us together. But now, with the truth finally out in the open, I realized that honesty wasn't just about revealing the truth. It was about being brave enough to face it head on. Think back to when you were in a relationship and something didn't feel right. Maybe your partner was distant or secretive, but you brushed it off as nothing. Don't make the same mistake I did. The importance of honesty can't be overstated. It's not just about avoiding hurt, but about building trust. When we communicate openly, when we're vulnerable with each other, that's when true connections are formed. But honesty also means being honest with yourself. Recognizing your own flaws and weaknesses takes courage. And it's exactly that kind of vulnerability that will ultimately set you free from the toxic patterns that can hold us back. As Sarah stood in front of her mirror, she gazed at the woman staring back, a reflection of strength and resilience born from the ashes of betrayal. She remembered the countless nights spent wondering if she was enough, if her love was worth fighting for. But now, she knew that it wasn't about being worthy. It was about recognizing the toxic patterns that had almost consumed her. Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke about the day she finally found the courage to walk away from the marriage that had slowly strangled her soul. "I thought I'd lost myself forever," she said. "But in those darkest moments, something inside me whispered. As I sit here today, I'm grateful for the journey that's brought me to this place. I've learned that honesty and communication are the foundation of any healthy relationship. It's not about being perfect. It's about being authentic and true to oneself and one another. If you're struggling in your own relationship, know that you're not alone. There is hope for healing and growth. Take a step back, breathe, and remember that your worth and identity are not defined by someone else's choices." Thank you for listening to my story.